The revised job numbers for the back half of 2024 and the first part of this year were so bad that Joe Biden might come back to fire everyone at the BLS. Now, we're going to get to those numbers in a minute and get past the freakout because you've got right-wing media outlets spiking the football on the Biden economy and the left is spiking the ball on the Trump economy. But there was another release this week that was buried in the noise that when you pair it with job revisions, paints a disturbing picture. So we're going to paint it, and then we're going to talk about what comes next. For the MeidasTouch Network, I'm Max from UNFTR. Let's go. All right, let's talk jobs. Take it away, Fox News.
We have breaking economic news today that could change everything. What we learned, the Biden economy was a hell of a lot crappier than we were told.
Okay, what is even happening at Fox News? Can you imagine this woman hanging in the break room with Kudlow and Jeanine Pirro?
Did somebody take my juice box from the fridge?
I didn't know that was a juice box.
If by juice box you mean Chardonnay, then I might have taken it.
Okay, I'm being mean and petty. Anyway, yeah, the job revisions were nasty. But let's take the Fox filter off and we'll go to CNBC for the real breakdown. And this is their instant reaction as the numbers were coming out. But afterwards, we're also going to conduct a little experiment. But first, here's the breakdown.
I see the biggest revision we've had. I go back 25 years here. This may be the biggest revision ever, Sarah. We minus 911,000 payroll growth from April of 2024 through March of 2025 is 911,000 less than previously reported. What has happened now to the month over month or the monthly growth rate has gone from what we thought was 147,000 a month to now just 70,000 a month.
All right, we're going to unpack these numbers in a minute, but I'm going to point something out right now, and I want you to rewatch just 10 seconds of this as Steve Leisman is eyeballing the numbers. Only this time, pay attention to the markets in the background. Just 10 seconds. Ready? Go.
What has happened now to the month over month or the monthly growth rate has gone from what we thought was 147,000 a month to now just 70,000 a month.
So Leisman is literally delivering like the worst job news and data. And in the background, the markets are like, woohoo, nothing to see here. This is like one of those videos when they tell you to count the number of passes so that it diverts your attention from the person moonwalking in the bear costume. I mean, equities remain unfazed by everything. It's actually incredible. So by now, you've probably heard me drone on about the labor market, but I want to do a quick high-level recap just so we're all on the same page going into the second part of this. The unemployment rate is garbage because it only counts people who are actively seeking employment within months of the survey. And this is survey data. Approximately 70 million Americans engage in freelance, supplemental, or gig work to make ends meet. In total, only 62% of Americans above the age of 18 are gainfully employed in this economy, and if we include the entire population, then it drops to the low 50s. So a little more than half of the population is supporting the other half as it is. But economists take a very narrow view of Americans between 25 and 54 in order to gauge the health of the economy. So as long as there's participation within this narrow band, then they assume all is well. And that's why you hear people like Jerome Powell say that the labor market appears to be strong. So in terms of revisions, you're going to continue to see people freaking out about this lousy data and using it to justify why Trump is cleaning house at agencies across the board. But it's just another distraction. The labor data that we get, like I said, is based on surveys in the immediate. It takes months and months to gather the actual data because it's coming from multiple sources. And eventually, the real data catches up to the survey data and we get revisions. Now, the reason this particular report is such a stunner is because the numbers are usually revised up, not down. And as you heard Leisman slip there, he's been doing this for 25 years and has never seen a revision so significant. So I will say that as the Trump administration bellyaches about the BLS, it's not entirely without merit, because this is the information that the Federal Reserve uses to achieve their dual mandate of full employment and low inflation. So under normal circumstances and a rational economic policy and a competent administration, all those things, I could get on board with a little bit of Fed finger wagging on this issue. But that's not where we are right now. The utter madness of placing double-digit, up to 50% tariffs on over 90 countries is recklessly absurd. So no independent Fed chair in their right minds would have brought down rates. Again, think about that dual mandate. They wouldn't have brought it down until they understood the impact of these tariffs on inflation. But now, the Fed is in a Sophie's choice position of stagflation. Now we know for a fact employment is crumbling and that there is inflation spreading throughout multiple sectors of the economy. Lower the interest rates, and there will be business activity, and it is possible that it could temporarily heat up the economy and spur hiring, which would, under normal circumstances, create inflationary pressures. And that's when the Fed would look to increase rates in order to cool inflation. So when everything is elevated, believe it or not, we don't have a playbook. And here's why. The only prior modern experience that we have with stagflation, which is high inflation and high unemployment, is the 1970s crisis. The way we got out of it is what Wall Street refers to as the Volcker shock, or sometimes the Volcker tourniquet. Paul Volcker, then the head of the Federal Reserve, rapidly increased rates to a peak of 20% in order to break the back of the economy. He wanted a full reset, and he got it. And the reason we can't revisit this tactic, aside from it being barbaric and in retrospect maybe causing more harm than good, is that it would push our short-term borrowing costs through the roof and add another catastrophic amount of debt to our already catastrophic debt. So that option is off the table. And short-term, by the way, is how we're choosing to pay back some of that debt right now, because the long-term treasuries that reflect everybody's faith in the U.S. economy are still elevated. So they can bitch and moan about the data from a year ago being all bad, all that they want. The bottom line is that they own this data this year, and they're painting themselves into a corner. Okay, but there was another economic release that I mentioned up front, and it didn't get as much attention given all the histrionics around labor revisions, and that's consumer credit. And there's a twist here as well that I find very aggravating. So first, take a look at these charts. The first one is the detail of the consumer credit release, and it shows that total credit outstanding increased by $16 billion in July alone, which blew past all expectations. The second chart makes it a little easier to visualize. So revolving debt, such as credit cards, jumped by over $10 billion, and non-revolving credit, like auto and student loans, increased by $5.5 billion. Importantly, mortgages are not included in these figures, and the housing market is another story altogether. Now, we'll tackle that soon, but in the meantime, the reason I want to draw attention to this release is because of how the pundit class and Wall Street interpret the jump in consumer debt. Wall Street and talking heads see increasing consumer debt as evidence that the consumer is spending more and therefore healthy. But this is on the heels of June data on delinquencies, which comes out quarterly, so we don't have an update just yet, but delinquencies are way up. And in our last video, we covered how core inflation, the metric that supposedly matters the most to the Fed and to policymakers, has been increasing by 0.1% every single month. Consumers aren't taking on more debt because they're comfortable doing it. They're taking on more debt because they're out of cash. And they still need things like, food and transportation and insurance and so on. And it goes back to that moonwalking bear. The markets just don't see you. And if the markets don't respond to the crashing out of the American consumer, then why would policymakers in this administration especially even care? Lastly, there's a term that you've probably heard before, but I've been hearing it more and more lately in a different context, and so I wanted to unpack it here because it relates to the topic at hand. The term is K-shaped. Here's a look at the technical definition of it as illustrated by Investopedia. This is a K-shaped recovery, emphasis on recovery. This is a graphic of the post-COVID recovery that we're theoretically in right now, but it's the same for any post-recession recovery period when industries come back to life in an uneven fashion. So depending on the economic environment and the nature of a recession, the industries might differ. Now, let's listen to how the pundit class is talking about this moment in K-shaped terms.
Well, we'll see. If you look at like retail sales, we're in a K-shaped economy right now. And I hear a lot of your speakers talk about that. Our high-end, I own luxury shopping centers. Right. We're having double-digit sales increase this year. Rolex, a lot of these people can't keep inventory in. You go to the other end, like a Red Lobster, which is selling to middle America, sales are flat this year. We're really struggling to keep sales flat. Everything is massive discounting going on in the middle market.
Now, broadly speaking, beyond LVMH, luxury stocks are riding a lot higher on this K-shaped economy where the wealthy keep spending, the middle and lower income consumers still cutting back. You see that in airlines, across travel, lots of companies right now. Ralph Lauren hitting an all-time high the other day. Richemont reporting a 6% rise in jewelry sales, and Brunello Cucinelli reaffirming its forecast of 10% sales growth here. So really strong at the very top of this market.
And here's a clip from Ailsa Chang of NPR speaking with Heather Long, the chief economist at Navy Federal Credit Union.
So you have called our current situation a so-called K-shaped economy.
Basically, the top 20% of American earners are doing pretty well. The stock market's up. Their home values have gone way up in the last few years. They are not that concerned about these tariffs because they have the cash on hand to be able to absorb any price increases. It's a really different situation for the bottom 80%.
So it's that subtle shift that I want to draw your attention to. We're no longer talking about a K-shaped recovery. Rather, we're beginning to refer to this as a K-shaped economy. And this is the biggest difference between recessions prior to 2008 and today. Now, we've had this type of recovery in the past, but then the trend lines tend to resolve themselves and they come back together within a determined period of time. And as you've heard from Heather Long just now, it's becoming an entrenched feature of the modern economy, an economy where we just saw $1 trillion in net worth go to the top 1% in the past year alone. Now, these seem to be the only numbers that never get revised, by the way. And notice that she said that 80% of Americans are living in that bottom line of the K. 80%. And that's coming from an economist from a credit union who has full visibility into the most creditworthy customer base that exists. And even she thinks the number is around 80%. Okay, so why harp on this as I have been in so many Meidas videos? Because the loyal opposition right now is the Democratic Party. No matter what the conservative outlets or the Wall Street talking head pundits say, this modern low-tax, money-printing, deregulation regime that we've been living under for nearly 20 years now isn't working. Under Obama, at least we expanded social safety net investments by extending unemployment benefits, subsidizing the Affordable Care Act exchanges, expanding Medicaid, and shoring up state budgets that were crippled from the fallout in 08 and 09. We also spent a few $100 billion in soft infrastructure, meaning repairing bridges and tunnels and paving roads, laying fiber and subsidizing wind and solar, to name a few. But even this was a tepid investment, as most of the funds that transferred from the Fed to Wall Street never left Wall Street. It wasn't reinvested in the real economy. Now, under Trump 1.0 and under Biden, it was more of the same. Different tone and tactics, but same result. Exorbitant amounts of cash flowing into the corporate sector and just enough to backstop social safety nets. This is how we deal with economic trauma. What's never been tested in the post-World War II American economy, and especially in the post-Nixon era fiat economy, is what happens when you rip out that net altogether, as the GOP has just done with the Big Beautiful Bill Act and the proposed sequel that they're taking up in the fall. Now, let's say they somehow develop a conscience, and that they repair the net when the consumer debt default floodgates open and bleeds out to the part of the economy that chips away at the gains at the top. It still does nothing to fix the fundamental flaw in our thinking. Everything has changed. I don't even pretend that the Republican Party has an answer to this, because they answer to the very tippity top of the food chain, the corporations. The burden of imagination rests squarely on the shoulders of the Democratic Party. And outside of the Stop Oligarchy tour, I don't hear a single thing. This whole Trump bad, bring us back has to stop. Now, progressives told Democrats during the Harris campaign not to believe their lying eyes when they looked at this very job data. We told them to listen instead, to put an ear to the ground. Because if they did, they would have heard the rumble of discontent growing louder and louder by the day. And now we have the numbers to prove it in these revisions. But once again, We're letting Republicans seize this moment as evidence that they're right to dismantle the agencies responsible for the numbers. It's time for us to own those numbers, to listen to people sliding down that precipitous decline of the K line and start imagining what a future looks like when we build an economy that lifts that line instead. For the MeidasTouch Network, I'm Max from UNFTR. Thank you as always to the Meidas Mighty and to the Mycellus brothers for having me here, and you can find me at UNFTR on both YouTube and Blue Sky. Until next time, heads down, elbows up.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.